Hello everyone, this is Gene from NYC and I'm back with a new video. So, there's actually a reason why I chose a basketball title as the object to be staring at for this video. And it isn't just because this is one of my favorite video games and one of the most fun sports games that I ever played. Interestingly enough, I've never been a big fan of sports games, despite being fairly athletic as a kid and watching sports and whatnot. But I did have a few sports titles growing up, a few football titles. I played games like Temco Super Bowl. There was like a NES volleyball game that I kind of enjoyed. I remember on the Genesis. I never played the Madden series, surprisingly enough. But there was, what is it? Oh, what's that dang football player's name? Joe. It's not Namath. Sheesh. Let me think. He used to be on the 49ers. I think he was the quarterback before Steve Young. I always remember the Niners because of Steve Young and Jerry Rice. And actually, when I was a kid, I watched football religiously because my mother watched it. She's a huge football fan. And she watched it, and I just loved the San Francisco 49ers back when they had Steve Young and Jerry Rice. And then I pretty much dipped out of football after the Niners stopped being a dynasty, and then, eventually Young and Rice retired. But the quarterback prior to Steve Young, I remember he did play a little bit in the 1990s. I just can't remember his flipping name. But I remember that he had a video game. There was a series of video games on the Sega Genesis that of football games under his name, and I had that for a little bit, probably from my uncle. But let me get to the point of the video. I'm not here to just ramble about my history of sports video games. The reason I'm making this video is because there's been a bit of response to a comment that Brie Larson made recently in one of her press tour interviews for the Captain Marvel film. And if you've seen, for example, Doug Ernst's video, he addresses that specifically. He mentions that Brie comments about taking judo. She says that once she started learning judo, that she started looking at people and wondering if she could toss them around, right? If she could throw them around. Now, I don't know if I have necessarily a unique perspective to this, but I'm going to share it anyway. I can, to an extent, understand where Brie is coming from. I grew up in very competitive environments. If you look at all of my interest, from sports to comics to fighting games, right? It's all competitive. I am a very competitive person, just by my very nature. I am a tomboy, so especially when I was a kid and not as secure in my identity, and I had a chip on my shoulder, right? And I was constantly trying to prove myself. So I could understand, again, to a certain point, sizing up people, watching them and going, yeah, I could beat them, or just looking at it like, you know what, yeah, maybe I could win, maybe I would lose, maybe they have this advantage, I have that advantage. I understand that because I've done that. I've sized up opponents. I have watched people and gone, I could lift that, I could outlift you, or oh dang, I couldn't move that if I worked out every day for the rest of my life. I've been there. And perhaps that's why I'm not as upset about her comments as some other people seem to be. But to be fair, and I do want to make this clear, I don't, at least to my recollection, right? I'm not going to say 100%, but to my recollection, I don't recall ever sizing up a person just for no reason. I don't recall walking in the street just randomly and sizing up people and wondering, if I could out-fence them, or if I could outrun them, or anything of this sort. For me, it was always in the context of competition, right? When I was in high school, we had a we had a fencing program, right? We had a fencing class, which of course I jumped at because sword fighting. And the class, at least when I took it, and this would be the late 90s, the early 2000s, was intergender. So, it was guys and girls. And so I considered everybody an opponent to me, regardless of gender. In fact, that class was one of the classes me and my male best friend at the time had. So we were constantly sizing up and competing against each other. So, in that regard, I was always, looking at people and going, okay, yeah, his lunge is better than mine, but I'm a bit faster, my arm's a bit longer, he doesn't have the reach I do, or he just started fencing. I have 2 years under my belt. I have the experience edge. So yes, I have done that. I have sized up people. I have watched them, and just thought about, okay, what are my advantages? What are my disadvantages? What are their advantages? What are their disadvantages? And so I completely understand that. And so from the competitor inside me, right? From a competitive point of view, I totally understand where Brie's coming from. The problem, or at least the problem for me, is that she, at least according to what she said. Now, maybe she misspoke, I don't know. I really think she shouldn't have said it. But it seemed that she was talking about just sizing up random people in regular life. Now, that's the part, I think, where a lot of people who are criticizing her are upset, because it's like, why would you do that? Why would you walk around, especially when you're talking about judo? Judo is a martial art, right? Judo, how do I put it? When it comes to the martial arts, there's always the possibility of injuring somebody, right? For example, in basketball, typically the point of playing basketball is to simply win a game, right? To score more points than the other person. Most of the time, you are not trying to hurt someone, right? Trying to hurt somebody is generally frowned upon. In martial arts, that's, I wouldn't say the only point, but again, it's martial arts. It's fighting. So there's this very strong expectation and oftentimes a desire to hurt the other person, at least a bit, right? I mean, boxing would not exist if it weren't for the fact that it's about, two people beating the hell out of each other. MMA exists because it's about two people beating the hell out of each other. Pro wrestling exists because it's about two people or more beating the hell out of each other. So I do understand from a certain perspective why there are some people reading this and getting upset, because she's basically in it, and I don't think she intended it this way, but she is kind of saying that she looks at people and wonders if she could beat them up. She looks at regular random people and asks herself, not if she could win, not if she could score more points, but if she could basically physically assault them, right, and beat them up. And I think that's what's bothering people. And on that note, again, as somebody who likes fighting games, and especially when I was younger, I was very much a martial arts enthusiast. Not so much now, but definitely back in the day, back when I was a kid, I was very much a martial arts enthusiast. So yes, I can understand why people are upset that this actress, who's supposed to be playing a superhero, somebody who defends people and defends the innocent, right, is admitting to walking around wondering if she can toss people around. People who are not her competitors, right? It'd be different if she said, oh, I was taking judo and then I was looking at my opponents in my judo class and wondering if I could, toss them around, or, I think in judo it's called rolling when you're practicing or sparring. So if she had said that, I think people would have understood more, because then it's in the context of a contest, right? And it doesn't come across like she's, fantasizing about assaulting random people. But the way that she said it, it comes across in this very negative light. It comes across that this woman who's been physically training for a while now, for at least several months, right, to play a superhero in a movie, who did learn some level of martial arts. Now, do I think she really learned judo as a martial art? No. She learned a couple of throws, a couple of holds, that look good for the movies. But she did learn some martial arts techniques. And the point of any martial art technique is to bring some harm to a person. Right? Let's not act as if, it's not meant to how do I put it? Let's not act like it's necessarily meant to be nice, right? Any martial art is about defeating and assaulting your opponent. And it's not the only thing that they're about, especially if you're a traditionalist and there's this very, philosophical and spiritual side to the martial arts. But let's be clear, whether it's Judo, which is supposed to be the gentle way, whether it's Aikido, whether it's boxing, even if it's self-defense classes, right? The physical part, the practical part, the fighting is about, right, hurting another person. Let's not act like it isn't. It is about hurting another person, causing them enough pain so that they will not fight you anymore. So, again, I think that she just shouldn't really spoken on it. Right, because now it just makes her look like this creepy woman who looks at random people and dreams about, tossing them to the ground or putting them in an arm lock or whatever judo moves that she may have learned for the film. So I guess to wrap this up, I'm of two opinions. As a competitive person who has sized up her opponents regardless of gender, I understand. I've had that experience of going, I can take him. I can take her. But from the martial perspective, right, it's not good to say that you look at random people and wonder if you could toss them around, right? Because again, martial arts, right, is a fighting. It's about fighting, and fighting is about harming other people. So when she said that she thinks about if she could toss someone around, I think what she intended was more from the competitive side, but the way it came across is that she's thinking or fantasizing about randomly assaulting other people. And again, this is the woman who's supposed to be playing a superhero who uses their martial abilities and their superpowers to protect the innocent, not to just randomly assault them or dream about randomly assaulting them. So, those are my rambly comments on it. So I think it's a gaffe. I think she really should have thought about her words, and perhaps she'll look back and think about if she's continued judo. I have no idea whether she has considered studying it past the requirements for the film. But if she is, right, if she developed an honest interest and is still practicing judo, she may want to look at what she said, look inside herself, and ask herself why she is learning judo. Is she learning it because she likes the competition? Is she learning it because she wants to know self-defense? Is she learning it because she wants to be able to protect herself or a loved one or an innocent person should something crazy happen one day? Or is she learning it because part of her wants to harm another person? Is she learning it for the right reasons or for the wrong reasons? That I think is a question that she needs to ask herself, and that's a question only she can answer. So those are my thoughts on it. Those are my rambly thoughts on it. If you like, please let me know what you think. Right? I want to hear from you, regardless of whether you agree, you disagree, you're somewhere in the middle, or you're totally don't care, you care too much. Just let me know. Anyway, have a good Saturday, everyone. Bye bye.